Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. We're here with Joe Gottlieb, President and CEO of SenSage, for another 5 Minutes with Joe. Today we're going to be talking about some data that was recently released by Google and the nature of what they're seeing in the servers that they interact with the the websites that they direct users to, and so they definitely have a nice pool of information that helps indicate some of the things that we should be thinking about with regards to the threat landscape. So what was interesting to you about that?
Well, I first read about this in the article by Dennis Fisher, Threat Post, and he's highlighting the fact that the Google data is sending some conflicting signals, but I think we can interpret and infer what's really going on here from what's being shown. The number of phishing sites found each month was down to about 100,000 near the end of 2011, but it's back up to over 300,000 being found per month. And I think this is part of a trend that I foresee is here to stay. Phishing has become the most sort of prevalent attack because, and in another article, Tim Wilson over at Dark Reading had a great quote. He says, people are much easier to fool than computers. And whether that's been said before or not, I think it's a great quote. It sums it up. The fact of the matter is that, yes, computers have vulnerabilities, and a lot of the security industry has been all about patching those vulnerabilities and erecting defenses to defend against incursions on things that are as yet unknown, zero-day, unpatched vulns, you name it. But the human, and we've always known this, that the human is the weakest link oftentimes in these infrastructures. And as phishing has become more and more sophisticated, it is now starting to emulate messages from your antivirus system, emulate updates from your trusted software vendors, and that's the one that is most sticky for me. I mean, when those things pop up, you really have a tough call to make. And I was recently talking to one of our very advanced cybersecurity expert friends over at KW, our partner in cyber intelligence services, and I was saying, so what do? You are definitely in the thick of this stuff, defending some of the most heavily attacked networks. And he says he does automate. He tells as many things as he can to automatically update when he knows he's in the sort of control surface of that particular piece of software. Because if you don't, it's going to surface a question to you.
Right.
And that question could easily be emulated by someone else. So the more times you're sort of making that judgment call, and we all know the more tired we are, the more sort of disorganized or sort of chaotically minded we are at any one time, trying to do all the multitasking that we do every day. When these things pop up and they're in the way of us doing our work in our white collar world on the PC, or blue collar, we're going to eventually wear down. We're going to go ahead and just to get that off our, out of our way, we're going to click oftentimes. And so that's something to watch out for.
Well, and just to add to that, I would say even if you had all the time in the world, and even if you, you were being safe, when it's coming from something you trust, whether it's in a social media site, whether it's, popping up on your laptop, you just sort of do think, well, this makes sense. I must have to do something with this, right? I mean, the trust piece it's not that we're idiots, really.
Well, and we talked about automating trust, and right. So we're trying, we're surrounding ourselves with technologies, and for our own convenience, we're setting policies for who we trust and how we trust them under what circumstances. Well, the most clever attacks are emulating the things we trust.
Right.
And to the extent that we are developing a familiarity and a comfort with trusting these things in the digital world, you could bet that there will be imposters. And in the physical world, we do a pretty good job of recognizing people. It used to be, people would wear a disguise and they would pass themselves off as individuals that maybe we should trust or, might trust. But today, when someone walks up to you and, says they're your best friend, right? Physically, you kind of know whether that's an imposter or not.
Right.
Digitally, it's a lot easier to impersonate that best friend,
right,
or a family member, or let's say the person that you work with at your bank.
I don't even think it's that. It's you're coming to me with something I'm attracted to. Justin Bieber tickets, or I shouldn't have admitted that probably.
Outed again.
But it's often not even that someone's trying to impersonate your mom, but that they're getting you right where you care the most about something like, concert tickets.
Yeah, and a more menial example of that is people's inability to just say no to a free USB stick, right? I mean, wow, this has some currency in the digital world. It's
Right.
storage, and it's free. It's mine. Well,
Right.
it's not free in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
It's packed with malware. So another thing that came out in this data that I found interesting was that the conflicting data that Google was publishing was that there was a certain number of sites that were down. I think the actual quantity of malware sites that were infected were down, and that just reflects, I think, some better stewardship on the commerce sites that are out there, of people doing a better job of protecting and securing those sites, and that's great news. The fact that there are concentrated sort of customer fronts with online presence, we've seen some improvement there. But the numbers cranking up on these phishing sites, largely driven by the fact that they're changing the URLs as often as every hour, and they're doing that to avoid screens. Right, so there are various apparatuses out there that are allowing us to avoid clicking on URLs that are known to be, have bad stuff going on behind them. And so, therefore, these guys are now churning the URL so that in the discovery time, they're able to get plenty of stuff done, and then they change the URL again.
And I think what's
keep
even
fresh.
more circular about that is they're buying those URLs with stolen credit cards in many cases, and they know that that credit card just has a few hours left before someone might have to, someone will discover and shut it down, or find the suspicious, activity and shut it down. So it's sort of this really ingenious industry that is costing them very little and costing us a lot.
Yeah, it's, you talk about how people are using data, the adversaries are using the data they can get to more effectively than we're using our own data to defend ourselves. And I think that's an unfortunate indictment on our effectiveness. And while we're always talking about best practices that we've seen in our customer base for getting together this data, being more effective at measuring and monitoring and adjusting your posture on really an iterative, continuous basis. So what to do about phishing? I mean, with all this assertion of how threatening it is, and I think it's good to understand the problem, but what can we do? I've noticed that training is often cited as something that has to be done. There's lots of opinions about training, and there's even some companies that are popping up, as you would expect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Problem exists, some companies will pop up to try to solve it, to train end users. And I think some of the good discussion about this is about how to make a training program really, really effective. What I've seen to be most effective in this space is when you can actually point to a breach, and ideally your own breach. And it's usually best if it's already
Not
been,
ideally. He didn't mean ideally.
It's best if it's already been outed, so you're not really disclosing anything new. But if you can point to something that happened that was relatively bad that people can relate to, and say, this is what happens when you don't pay attention to the sort of training we're trying to provide you with, it brings it home. Mm-hmm. And then you can give them some training. You can't belabor this. This can't be a whole week course. You've got to be peppering people with enlightenment and awareness. But to bring it home into a context, I think is very, very useful. And then all the training that you can do in the world is probably not going to be a silver bullet either. You want to keep your users trained, but then being able to do the monitoring that we've been talking about. The phishing attacks are going to continue to get smarter and more effective, and there will be a user that tires out or doesn't even have a clue and is going to go ahead and get infected. And so being able to watch the behaviors in your infrastructure once something gets affected. Chances are they're not after what's on that end user's PC. Mm-hmm. They need to now navigate from that user's PC after getting instructions from a bot herder, a bot control, command and control server, to now start getting to a target with some good payload. So what we're seeing now in the more sophisticated attacks and sophisticated defenses is the ability to monitor these situations and actually watch the penetration of one of these attacks, where as it goes from a point of compromise that typically involved an end user that
clicked on Justin Bieber tickets, and the real servers typically of interest that are heavily defended, but now that you're inside the network, you can bring a different set of credentials. Maybe you're logging some keystrokes, getting some passwords, getting some account information. Getting onto the file server, and then later someone else downloads something else from that that's infected. Yep.
So really having a good monitoring defense, and as we always say, being able to use that data wisely and in a way that continuously improves your operation is really key. So we beat a dead horse there, but that's what we're about, and we like to bring you these stories and discussions so we can highlight not only the state of the problem statement, but also some best practices and how people are navigating getting through it.
Yeah. And so, by the way, I think you may have sent me an email with some action items, but I didn't click on the file because
Yeah, that one's a good one. You can trust that one.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for 5 Minutes with Joe, and we'll be back again with another episode soon.